Okay, so these are some real artifacts from Mississippi, made of the stone that was sent to me. Same type of stone. As you can see, these are all fairly thick. And it looks like they've all been resharpened, at least to some extent. Some of them might be pretty close to the original size. I'm not sure if they all had these barbs. Like this could have had barbs on it. This one here, and it just got resharpened and lost the barbs, but it's hard to tell. I think you can tell this one has been resharpened just with pressure flaking or maybe even some punch work, but it looks like pressure flaking. I'll be duplicating this one here. We're trying to come close to it. But to me, the edge looks pressure flaked. It looks like it was, fatter to start with, but who knows? It may have been made, just like this, without any resharpening, I mean. Okay, so, and the striking resemblance between this and stones we have in Texas, like Tecovas jasper and alabates, is pretty amazing. So I'm wondering if maybe some of the Cahokia points were made of this stuff as well, the ones that look like they're made of alabates or something similar. And you can tell there's pressure flaking here. The edge is really thin on this. It takes a certain amount of skill to produce a thin edge because this is hollow. It has a hollowing of the edge here with the pressure flaking. It makes the edge very thin. See that? See how it's kind of concave on each side? This side not so much, but this side, yeah. So there's an intentional attempt to get the edge extremely thin. And I think these were mostly knives, but again, I'm not going to make any judgments on these. They could be projectile points or spear points, handheld spear points or knives, or maybe just used like this and maybe hung from tongs or something around the neck or whatever. But to me, they look like knives. They would be hafted in something thick, a thick piece of wood or bone with a lot of glue and just some wrapping, simple wrapping around it. There's not much of a stem, so there's not much of a need for a lot of strength on these. So when there's a small stem, I tend to think of them as a projectile point, but they could also be knives. Okay. And it looks like they're all heat treated too. On this one especially, you can see long pressure flakes, and that's much easier to do on heat treated. And the gloss is deceiving because sometimes these artifacts will have gloss because of age and not because of heat treating. But this one looks heat treated to me, so I'm going to use heat treated stone. Yeah, I got plenty of room, but the thickness, it's almost there already. This is almost as thick. Let's see what happens. And I had this this batch of what do they call it? Gum Arabic or Acacia, ACACIA gum. And I mixed it with water, and this is what it looks like when you mix it with water. This one is still not dry. I heated it a little bit to dry some of it out, and it just becomes very brittle when dry, and it doesn't melt. I mean, it doesn't melt at at the temperature of the skillet, which is around 300 degrees. So I guess it needs higher temperatures to actually melt it, but I'll try that later. But as far as being sticky, it's only sticky when it's wet. And it's not, even when it has some water in it, it's not very flexible. It's very crumbly, this gum Arabic. It's extremely sticky when it's wet. I mean, very, very sticky. As soon as it dries out, it gets all crumbly. All right. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to use that for glue. I might mix it with something to see if it works. Okay. Just out of curiosity, $354 grains on this artifact. 354, it's pretty heavy. Now this is a little bit different than usual because I'm trying to keep it thick, which kind of throws you off your game a little bit. Flaking is more like just glancing blows. I may try to send in a thinning flake if there's a lump somewhere, but for the most part, this is not going to require thinning flakes. Just carefully place trimming flakes. Trimming, I mean short flakes. And when the real one, the surfaces are all real smooth. I mean, there's no big lumps on this surface. So I can't have like this sort of stuff. I gotta make sure it's smooth and there's no bold flaking. There's a few original flakes that you can see, like right there and right there. I think there's punch work done on the notches, or it's very heavy pressure. But to me, it looks like punch work. You can almost see the size of the tool that they were using. You know, and if it was pressure work, they would have probably removed more flakes than that. You know, pressure flaker, you're kind of inclined to just naturally take a lot of flakes off. But with a punch, you only take a few at a time. So it looks like it's punch work. There's pressure work on that side, but this side looks like there's punch work, and they didn't really spend much time on it, which is pretty common. They don't really spend too much time on many of these artifacts. Yeah, I'll figure out soon, you know, where to send a flake in to clean that up, you know, a little bit. For now, I just want to shape the edge. It's pretty much, this one was pretty easy to start with. If I end up breaking it, I'll just get the other piece. You know, I had two pieces in the beginning of the video. Okay. Now, everybody asks me how they made the originals with, you know, just by using hammerstone and antler. What was the technique? How did they use the antler? What type? Did they use bone? What type of bone? What type of antler? What type of hammerstones? Is it known to the archaeologists what all this stuff was? And sometimes it is when they can find a hammerstone or something in the assembly. They call them assemblies when they find all this stuff together. Sometimes they'll find a hammerstone, but I don't know what type of hammerstones might have been found with this type of artifact. I know a lot of hammerstone work was used in the past, and I tend to think that Hammerstones were the default tool for everything. They tried to get as good as they could with hammerstone and take as much off with hammerstone first. Sometimes completing the point, maybe to 90% before they trimmed it up with pressure. But for these, I don't know. They may have been all reduced down with nothing but antler for this particular type. It's hard to say. Again, because I don't have a reference to what else was found with the artifacts. Now, did they grind the edges back then, back in the day? Did they do this kind of thing with the stone or whatever? I don't think they did very much of it, to tell you the truth. They may have, but just personal opinion, I don't think they did very much grinding. Just like I don't do all that much. I do some grinding, of course, but I try to use the platforms from the previous flakes, or try to use surfaces from the previous flakes as platforms, so I don't have to be grinding it every time or shaping a platform every single time. Now, see, you kind of want to, the reason why you would prepare platforms each and every time is so you can avoid that kind of thing, but oh well. I'm not saying that you can't prepare every time, of course. You can. I just usually don't. And I don't think they did in the past either. So you can see there's a little crack in the tip there. And they had a pressure flaker, and they're perfectly capable of removing that, but they didn't, so it was just expedient. The Flintknapping was expedient. They are perfectly capable of removing all step fractures. They were highly skilled, but they left them in, which means that on this particular one at least, they did some expedient napping. You can see the steps right there. This type of termination, you see that it's kind of scooped out instead of broken off. It's scooped out. This is a very shallow hinge termination. In case you're wondering on the terminology, there's hinges, regular hinges, and there's reverse hinges. Reverse hinges go through the stone the opposite way and usually break it. A hinge at the termination at the end of the flake, it will just scoop out a little bit and then pop out. A step will break. A flake will step by breaking. It'll travel, snap, and it'll be an incomplete removal at the very end or the termination of the flake. If there is no termination, if it's all nice and smooth, it's called feathered. It's a feathered termination. But this particular stone lends itself to these little scoops or these hinges. Okay, so the barbs are drooping down. I think I have enough room here. Plenty of room to. It's going to be slightly larger than the real one, maybe. Let's see, do I have a pen? I'm going to cheat and mark the notches. And it's not perfectly symmetrical. But I'm going to try to keep it kind of symmetrical. So I'm going to use the pen marks just as a reference to start the notches. They'll go away pretty soon when I start flaking. Flaking the other way. But just this gives me the reference points where the base stops and the barb starts. And I can just whittle through the middle part. Of course, I'm not being very neat about it. See that? A little bit too many step fractures there. Pretty crude flaking on the base, but it's functional. It's very strong. Okay. My base is actually thinner, or the stem on mine is actually thinner. Okay, I'll finish that up a little bit later. I have the reference points in. Okay. I need to smooth out the faces with some flakes, and then I can just work on the edge and I'll be done. And, deepen these notches. and then I'll be done. It can go a little bit thinner, so I'm gonna try to strike a large flake. Okay, so that's it for the punch work. It's already 30 minutes. I'm going to finish this up with pressure and maybe some light punch work on the edges. The notch, I'll try to get it right. See how the barbs droop. This one's more accurate than this side over here. Anyway, I'm at 30 minutes. All right.